So, Mother called me recently and asked me to make a video for my oldest brother, Tim, and he's really old. He's a year and 6 days older than me or something like that, 8 days older than me. And apparently Tim has requested a video of how to make Mom's yeast bread, yeast rolls specifically. Now, why they didn't call and ask Terry, who's the queen of making these, I'm not certain. I've got two guesses. One, I look the most like Mother, or two, Mom knows that I've done some videos when I was teaching foods classes, and so maybe she thought I would be more adept at this. I don't know. But nevertheless, that's what I'm doing here today. Now, I'm going to put this on YouTube. So if anybody other than family, if any YouTubers other than family stumble across this, please realize this was just done as a family thing. I'm not trying to make this look ultra professional, so no critics, please. All right, let's start by looking at Mom's recipe, and I think this was actually her mother's recipe, and I'll have to include this for Tim, but I've assembled the cast of characters already here, so we'll get started. Okay, so it starts with a half a stick of butter or margarine. I always use butter. I don't even buy margarine anymore. I don't know anybody who does, but maybe there are people who still do. Don't use butter. And that needs to be melted. So I've already got it on the stovetop in a small pan melted. And to that, I'm going to add 1 cup milk and 2 3/4 cup water. So I've already got those measured out here. Let me set aside my yeast. I'm going to add those to the melting butter. And I'm going to reduce the heat because I don't want that getting too hot. That's going to be added to the flour mixture for the yeast to proof. Okay, now we're going to begin next. Oh, poo, I just knocked over my yeast. Didn't spill enough to matter though. We're going to begin next with the flour. Now the recipe calls for 4.5 to 5 cups flour. That's the thing about making bread. You don't have to be as precise with your measurements as you would with something like cookies or cakes, because it comes down to a matter of feel. So I'm going to start with about 2 cups in here. And to that, I'm going to add 2 of the packages of yeast. Now, a package of yeast is 2 1/4 teaspoons. 1 package equals 2 1/4 teaspoons. So if you're using yeast from a bottle, you'll just have to measure out 4.5 teaspoons. Okay. To that, I add 1/2 cup sugar, and 2 teaspoons of salt. Now, the reason I think Mom asked me to do the video is because I have said to her in the past, and to other people in the past, I promise you I did wipe this countertop down very well prior to stirring this up. So I'm going to go ahead and put that yeast in there. Guarantee I did. I'm a neat freak. So anyway, I think the reason that Mom asked me to do this is because back when I was a lot younger and was trying to make this myself, I just was not having a lot of success. And then one day I watched her. I don't know that I intentionally did this or just happened to be at the house when she was making it. I watched her make it, and then it all somehow just kind of fell into place. And so I got to where I could make them with no issues. All right, now on my stovetop over here, I have the buttermilk water mixture, the melted butter, water, and milk. Now this is what we're going to use to proof the yeast that's in the flour mixture. Now what a lot of people do is proof their yeast in their water sugar mixture. Why Mother and her mother did it differently, I don't know, but this works, and so this is the way we've always done it. You need your temperature of this to be warm, but not so warm that it kills the yeast. So Mom's method of determining whether or not this is warm enough is to stick your finger in. And if you can tolerate the heat, but it's not too hot, in other words, it's just a nice warm, then it's time to put it in here. So that's the way it is for me right now. I'm going to add it to the flour mixture, and then I'm going to stir it in. Okay, now I like to use a Dutch, what do you call this thing? What do you call this thing? Come on, help me out here. Dutch, it's one of these, but a Dutch one. Whisk. Hey, you can talk, Ryan. A Dutch whisk. Ryan is my videographer today. I like to use a Dutch whisk to do this because as you add more flour, it gets tougher to stir, and the Dutch whisk kind of lets you get things mixed in well without getting all clogged up in the whisk. Okay, so you want to beat that till it's pretty smooth. These are still a few lumps, but till it's pretty smooth. And then I add, move these things out of the way, I add a cup at a time, or maybe even a half a cup at a time. Again, your measurements are not precise. You're going to end up using 4.5 to 5 cups flour. So I add a cup at a time and stir. And I ought to be able to get this cup stirred in pretty well. But eventually, it will get tougher. Okay, so that's what it looks like after what is the 3rd cup. Remember, I started with 2 cups. Now I've added a 3rd cup. This will be the 4th cup. And you can see I'm not doing a precise measurement here. About 4 cups now. And what we want it to do is get to where it's just clinging to itself. And you can see that it's starting to do that. It's pulling away from the sides of the bowl and starting to stick to itself. But it's not quite right yet. It still needs a little bit more. I need it to be, I don't know the word. There's a word that expert chefs use to describe what the batter looks like when it's about right. I'm going to go with about a half a cup now. And again, not precise measurements because more flour is going to get mixed into it when you need. So at this point, I'm at 4.5 cups of flour. And you can see that it's starting to pull away from the sides. And this is what you should start to see. I've heard people call that hairy. I've heard them, it's just shaggy. Maybe that's the right word. It should start to look a little bit shaggy. Now I can go another half a cup in this, probably, and be fine. But I'm going to try to do, it probably needs a little bit more. Sometimes I just manage to work in, probably not a good thing that I just licked that off my finger, and I'm going to start kneading in a minute, but we're the ones eating it, not you, so I guess that's cool. Okay, now you can really see what I'm talking about. See how it's really just sticking to itself, and it just looks kind of shaggy in there. That's the point when you're ready to turn it out of the bowl onto a surface to flour. And that's what I could never understand when I was trying to make bread the first time, going from directions, from just instructions. All right, now, because I have now licked my finger and wiped my nose, I'm gonna go back to the same thing. Wash my hands, because my hands are gonna have to go into this. So clean hands are imperative. I've also removed my rings because I'm going to be kneading, and that can sometimes work its way into the into my settings. So the rings have been taken off. And I'll dry my hands with a paper towel, not a towel that's just been sitting on the cabinet because, again, trying not to transfer germs. It is, after all, COVID time. It's been COVID time for almost a year, and I'm particularly sick of it, but there we go. All right, so I floured my surface, and I'm going to turn out the batter, or dough, I should probably call it correctly. And again, you can see that it's just kind of shaggy in there. Okay? Now, this is where it comes down to feel. Another thing that I couldn't quite get until I watched somebody make bread. All right, so I'm going to add some flour to the top, and I'm going to knead. and it's still pretty soft. What I like to say is it needs to be a nice firm feel to it without being soft. I don't want it extra firm, but I don't want it super soft either. And if you look at, if you watch videos about bread making, they'll show you that you should be able to put your finger in the dough, and if it springs back too quickly, then it's too firm, or if it doesn't spring back at all, it's too soft. So you kind of, I don't know, for me it just came down to a matter of watching Mother do this process and seeing what it looked like afterwards. So this really for me was the part that is just kind of figuring out what's the right texture for it to be like. To me, that's about right. It might be a little soft. It could stand. I mean, I could work a little more flour in there if I really want to. It's just about perfect for my measurements anyway. And I've heard people say you should knead it for X number of minutes. I don't do that. I just knead it until it feels right to the touch. So let's say if I put my finger in there, it does slowly start to spring back. It doesn't just hang in there. It stays in just a little bit, so that's what I said. Some people might add a little more flour and have a little bit firmer dough. To me, this is about right. Okay, now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this over into a warm greased bowl. Actually, what I'm going to do is wash out the bowl that I just used to mix this up in with nice hot water. Now I'm going to grease that with Crisco and transfer this in, okay? So that's what I'm doing right now. All right, so I have washed my bowl, glass bowl. We prefer to use glass bowls for this, in the warmest water I could tolerate. And now I'm going to get a little bit of shortening on a paper towel, and just because I don't like it at my fingernails. And I'm going to coat the inside of that warm bowl really well. And then I'm going to transfer over my dough into it. And now what I'm going to do is cover this with a tea towel, set it in a warm place, and let it rise until it about doubles. Now, that usually takes about an hour, but if you're really, really, really impatient, like sometimes I might be, my middle name probably should have been Lydia. That's Lydia McLaughlin, my grandmother. Then if I'm really impatient or I'm in a hurry, then I sometimes will set it on a heating pad on a low setting, and that kind of helps increase or speed up the rising time. So right now it's going to get covered with a tea towel. It's going to get set in a warm place and wait for it to rise. So my dough has now been resting, and I actually cheated because I was impatient, and I put it on my heating pad at I think a medium temp, low temp, which made it rise a little bit faster. So you can see now that it has doubled in size, maybe even a little more than doubled in size. And again, I had just had it covered with a tea towel on a heating pad. Don't have to put it on the heating pad. I just did that because it speeds up the rising process. All right, now I prefer to bake these in a glass pan, and that's because I can see the bottom of the browning of the bottom of the rolls better in a glass pan than I can in a metal pan. And now what I'm doing is I've just once again some Crisco on a paper towel, and I'm coating the bottom of that glass pan and sides of the glass pan really well. Again, because the dough is very sticky, tacky, and you're never going to be able to get them out of the pan if you don't grease it well. I don't know whether you could use cooking spray. I've never done that. Mother never did that, so that would be like sacrilegious to use something other than Crisco. I know that in other bread recipes I've seen people use olive oil, which would be fine too. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to smear that on my hands as well, because my hands are about to go into this mix. So my hands have been washed good again. And I'm going to punch the dough down. Now that it's punched down, I'm going to divide it in half. Now, if I wanted to make bread, and I could get real precise and get out a knife and cut this, but we never do that. We're country cooks. If I wanted to make bread, then there I have my 2 bread loaves. So you would just put those into bread pans and make them, you would set them in a bread pan with the pretty side up and let them rise again. But we're going to make rolls, so I'm going to take one of the halves and have that. So I've got about 1/4 of the batter, of the dough. And now, this never works out perfectly for me, but I'm going to pinch off what would be about the size of a roll. And so I should be able to get 5 rolls out of this 1/4 section of dough. Like I said, sometimes it works well, other times not so much. There's 3, like this time, probably not so much. 4, and looks like one of them is going to be a tad small, so I'm going to grab some batter, or dough, I keep saying batter, from over here. Kind of smush that in there. Try to make it look a little smoother on top. And there's, oh, I had 5. I can't count. I'm a French teacher, not a math teacher. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're trying to get 20 rolls. 7, 8, 9, and again, it's sticky, so you may need to reapply some shortening. And that's what's happening to me right now. I didn't get enough shortening on, so more shortening going on my hands here. Oh, it's kind of a gross process. If you have some tactile sensitivities. Okay, now I'm going to split this second section into halves, so basically 2 more 1/4s of my dough. And again, these don't look super smooth on top always, which makes them, I guess, a little more rustic looking, or what's the word people use nowadays? Organic looking. And here I am with my last 1/4, which will make the last 5 rolls. And the last 2 are going to be large. Or I could try to work some of this batter or dough into one of my smaller pieces, but I'm just going to, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I'm just going to leave it out. All right, so now I've got 20 rolls. And they're now going to go back on into a warm area. I'm taking them right back over to my heating pad. They're going to be covered with tea towel again, and they're going to rise to the size that you want them to be to bake. About double what they currently are. All right, so here they are. They've risen to about the size that I would expect them to be. Now, by the way, you can put these in the refrigerator and they will rise overnight, believe it or not. Sometimes I do that on Saturday evening. I'll make them on Saturday evening, get them to the point where I put them in the bread in the 9x13 pan, stick them in the refrigerator, and they rise, and then I bake them when I get home from church. So I've got my oven preheated to 375. They're going to go in there for 15 to 20 minutes. All right, so mine have baked 18 minutes now, which is seems to be about right for my oven. And this is what I was telling you about using a glass pan. You can see how nicely brown they are on the sides and bottoms as well. Then if you choose, you can take a little melted butter, brush the tops. And then I usually let them sit in the pan for a few minutes, cool in the pan for a few minutes. Then I take the same tea towel I've been using all along, and then I turn them out onto the tea towel to finish cooling, and you're ready to serve it. There you go, Mom's yeast rolls. Okay, so I had intended to have the video done at the prior stopping point. But then I turned them out, and now you can see they're upside down. I'll flip them over, obviously, to serve them. But but I wanted you to see what they should look like after baked. Oh my gosh. Just had to do that part.